Welcome to day 4 with Uncle Frank. It is February 24th, 2022. And there's supposed to be a bunch of derbies going on, Uncle Frank. And I think we're the only live show in town now.
We are the derby today.
The final day of the BPT on Lake Fork, postponed until Friday due to inclement weather, 30 degrees, sleet, nasty stuff there. And they've got 10 boats and 10 cameras, and it's going to be sunny and beautiful tomorrow. And then the first 2 days of the National Professional Fishing League on Cumberland, likewise, 30 degrees, sleet, rain, snow, rising a couple feet a day.
Yeah,
they got all the boats in this
heard
morning.
About that lake was it was coming up like mad.
Yeah, they got all the boats in this morning, and then they canceled the first 2 days of it. So, have you ever had a tournament in your day where you got the boat in the water, were ready to roll, and then they canceled the tournament day once you had already mentally been prepared to compete?
They didn't cancel it on the water. They canceled it that evening, the evening before the event, a couple of times actually. The one time on Lake Erie, when I took third, they canceled the second day. That night, they canceled day 2 on it, which was a bummer, but it didn't matter. The weather was terrible.
Mental grind in those tournaments, isn't it? Because not only do you have to worry about your fish, you have to worry about the changing conditions, you have to worry about all the safety, all of the conditions, and then stay in it and ignore the physical pain that you are going through on the water during those events. Right,
and here's the crazy thing. Just like you mentioned, you had to worry about what your fish were doing. We had an east wind come in hard, and it was gale warnings. They canceled day 2. Day 3, this was when I was catching them burning spinner baits. Day 3 came, and the water was still rolling residual 4 and 5 foot rollers into that bank, and it was muddier than all get out. Those fish bailed on that area. Of course they would, because they were only in 2 feet of water. So they bailed on it. And I wound up going and catching all my fish deep the last day. So I was really happy that I had a couple different patterns going in that event, because if I relied on that shallow bite, I would have been burned bad. I would have still made the classic and still won the points, but I would have been burned really bad. And I was so fortunate to have those deep fish, but that's how I fish the Great Lakes. I find multiple patterns, so if something happens, I have backup.
I went back for all our viewers. I went back, and right before the show started, I showed Frank the 2007.
2007.
Was it 2007? Yeah. It was that long ago?
Yeah, I believe so.
Or somewhere around there. The World's Greatest Fishing Show with Mark Zona that you were on from Presque Isle Bay.
It was
It's still out there. You can Google if you go to Zona's channel. Like I said, I was on Zona's channel watching the Aaron Martin's tribute show that he released a couple days ago. Very touching show there. But then I went down the YouTube wormhole like I always do, and I said, I wonder if it's on there. And I Googled Frank Scalish, Mark Zona. Boom, it pops up. It's like episode 3, I think, of that season, and you can watch Frank and Mark catch smallmouth, steelhead, and largemouth after our show's over, if you are so inclined. The whole show's out there. Kind of a memory lane trip.
It was a fun show. We actually went out there with the sole and total and only intent was to smallmouth fish, but we were early enough, and I was still guiding for steelhead back then, and I knew a section of a river real close to there that had a pile of fish in it, and so it was kind of like a surprise. I said, hey, I got an idea. We can go catch steelhead. And Mark's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm in, but I don't have waders. I don't have fly rod. I said, I brought everything. Don't worry. And we went out, and it was, he's a special kind of guy. I mean, no lie. He's a special kind of guy. He was a great sport. We had so much fun. And him and I became really good friends right before that, but of course after that as well. And he's just a special guy. I mean, what you see him like on his shows is exactly what he's like off of his shows. So there's never a dull moment.
But even then, you were that I guess big build,
24,
the jerk bait
24A.
that you always
Yeah.
talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's what you caught him on in that show.
Oh yeah, the 24A, the Bomber 24A. I make them suspend, and then and I've been doing that forever. Obviously, we filmed the show in 2007, but I had been doing that long before then. And at that particular show, that 24A outperformed every other jerkbait.
Very nice.
So, yeah, it was good.
So we are, I believe, what is today? Thursday.
And
the Classic starts on Friday, a week from tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
I think we may have a very timely topic for today's day 4 with Frank Scalish. What are we talking about today, Frank?
We're talking blueback herring, guys. I got throttled in my DMs about these things, and I know a lot about how to fish on blueback herring lakes. I've experienced it for quite a number of years, fishing that chain of lakes in North Carolina that are all bluebacked, and starts with Murray and then runs up the chain from there into the North Carolina region. A bunch of years ago, I did a seminar at a sporting goods store, and I talked only about baitfish. The entire seminar it was nothing but baitfish, and I went through all of them, and then I went into stuff that you find on the Great Lakes and in some of your New York lakes, like alewives, emerald shiners, Cisco's, that kind of thing. And I tried to find it, and I couldn't find it, so I had to go back in and dive on the computer. And today's show was really going to be all kinds of different bait fish, but I decided I would start on the blueback herrings first because I got a lot of DMs about the blueback. So I said, well, let me get the blueback out of the way, and then I'll go to the gizzard, shad, threadfin, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when I started going into the bluebacks, I'm like, you know what? I think there's way too much information just in this.
Show.
Yeah, just in this species. So we're just gonna do the
and it's primarily an East Coast species.
Correct. And the real blueback herring, there's no difference. Live in the ocean. And basically, they're pelagics. They live in the ocean. Then they migrate up the freshwater rivers to spawn. Some of the lakes got stocked on purpose with bluebacks because they can live in freshwater. They're anadromic or diadromic, whatever it's called. They do both. Okay. So what happened is a lot of these lakes got blueback herring in them because of fishermen using live bluebacks for bait, that at the end of the day, they're done. They dump their bucket out, and the bluebacks, and they thrive. They spawn viciously and multiple times. So and we're talking 60,000 to 130,000 eggs everywhere. So the blueback can explode in population. Anyhow, so after researching all of this, I decided that we're just going to do a show specifically on bluebacks. And here I preach all the time to you guys that you're never too good of an angler to learn something. The minute you think you're too good to learn anymore, you stop growing in this sport. Matt made a reference a bunch of shows ago about how it's more comfortable to understand why something you're doing is working and why the fish have to be there than just knowing that if I go here this time of year, I'm going to catch them. Even though your result will be the same, if you know that you have to be in a certain place at a certain time and you're going to catch bass, whether you know why the bass have to be there or not, you're still going to catch them. But understanding why they have to be there gives you a lot of more opportunities on other lakes that have similar situations. So yesterday, and when I was researching some of this stuff just to get my facts right, I actually learned something because I knew from fishing these North Carolina lakes all the time. I knew where my focuses were, where I catch them, where I don't catch them, and blah blah blah. And then I learned something, and the bell went off. And I'll get when I get later on in the show, I'm gonna say here's where the bell went off, and you guys are gonna be this show's gonna be in depth. That's all I'm gonna tell you. You're gonna learn a lot in this show today.
Very cool. Like I said, I think what I was saying, and it was from it was actually from, I'm trying to figure out what year it would be. It was something that David Walker said to me while I was interviewing him for the 2013, I believe, Bassmaster Classic on Grand Lake. And I was doing the preview stuff for Bass Zone, blah, blah, blah. You know, are you catching them? What do you think it'll take and stuff? And David Walker kind of changed my whole outlook on it. And he said, no, I'm not catching them, but I'm fishing to where the fish are going.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, huh? And that kind of divulged into a conversation of, instead of asking, are you catching them? Are you on them? The proper question is, do you understand the fishery?
Yes.
Because I would much rather have confidence that an angler is going to catch them who understands the fishery than a guy who is currently catching them but does not know why he's catching them.
Right. And so that goes back to the old saying, yep. If you fish behind them, you never find them.
You got to heard that.
Yeah, that's what we used to always say. Yeah, if you fish behind them, you never find them because you're never where they're going. You're always late.
Where they've been.
Too late. Yeah, you're always too late. So yeah, it's crazy. This sport, every time I never stop falling in love with fishing, which is the craziest thing you can ever say, because you sound like a moron. But I can never stop falling in love with this sport because I learn stuff all the time, and every time I learn something new or every time I figure something else out, it excites me more and makes me want to actually go out and go fishing even more. It's weird. I never get bored of it. You know what I mean? I just don't ever get bored of it. And this show today is part of the reason why. What are you doing?
You ready for a graph? This is a big graph. There it is. See that? One end it says no little, the middle of it says no everything, and the other end says no little. And as an angler, you always start out here with the no little, and a lot of anglers get up to where you think you know everything. But the really good anglers get down on the other side, and I think the more you are, the more you're in it, and the more in depth you get it, you realize how much you don't know. And it's getting over that top and down on the other side. That's the hardest part, where I think a lot of anglers get stuck in their ways. That's where like shows like you and what you do help people understand, okay, you're a couple years in, you fish some club tournaments, you've caught, I know how to catch fish and everything. And then you start experiencing new things. You start experiencing bluebacks. You start experiencing alewives, grass, all sorts of different things. And as you grow as an angler, you realize you know less as an angler.
That's right.
Is that not a fair? So, I mean, even if you're not in a part of the country that has bluebacks in it right now or something, there's certain things you can glean from this, how you're researching these fisheries, what you're looking for in bait fish tendencies that you can take and then apply across the Midwest and the East, whether like it is alewife, shad, and now they're going to be little differences. But what Frank's going to go into today is going to show you how to take the primary forage in your lake and understand it to put yourself in high percentage areas. So
because the bass are the bass, okay. But I'm gonna get into that later on in this. I'm gonna actually talk about the bass last. We're gonna only talk about blueback herring movements first. The last thing is the bass. And I've got several maps and stuff I'm going to show you. Each map is going to be different. I'll point the differences out. I'm telling you guys, this is going to be one of my favorite shows.
Well, let's roll.
Okay, let's go. All right. So first of all, Matt, do you have a picture of a blueback you can pop up real quick?
I can't, but I was too busy doing high-end graphs over here. I'm sorry, Frank.
No, you did great. Okay, so I'll go with a description. Okay. First of all, the blueback herring, they're called bluebacks, but in real life, their back, their top of their back is actually like an olivey color, a semi-transparent olive. Their shoulders are almost amber olive, but if you look at them, it's like somebody sprayed them with blue glimmer on their back. So they reflect blue pearls or glimmer blue. You know the color glimmer blue. That's what they reflect on their backs. Now, when you see a blueback herring, that's actually, yeah, there you go, perfect. When you see a blueback herring that the back is actually dark blue, it's because he's dying.
Really?
Or so what happens is they get stressed out as stripers go and start smoking on these fish, and they get all stressed out. They start morphing this color change in their back, and their backs get dark blue, like black blue almost. Those fish are dying. When they're alive and they're healthy, they don't have that color. It's an olivey amber color with blue pearls in them. Okay, and their bellies are white pearl. So this should give you clues on crankbait choices or jerkbait choices. I always, when I paint my jerkbaits, I always put white gut bags on them, and I either do white pearl with blue pearl mixed, or white pearl with a purple pearl mixed. This reflects the same light that a bass would see if he was looking up at the bait fish on the belly. This is what he would see if he was looking up. They don't see the top of them when they're underneath them. You follow me? But as your jerkbait pitches and rolls,
So this portion that I'm
right, that portion right there. Now on this mature fish, it's solid. But on the immature fish, as they get past the center of the bait, they start to get transparent almost underneath the belly. So this is the kind of effect. But anyway, I'm digressing. So blueback herring look almost 100% identical to alewives. And a lot of people confuse the two. Probably one of the major differences between the two is alewives spawn in much colder water than the bluebacks do. They're similar in habitat range. They're both pelagics. Is that a alewife or a blueback?
I believe it's a juvenile blueback.
Yeah. So if you got an alewife, they would look almost identical, but you don't have to pull it up. They get the idea. So in saltwater, alewives grow big, like literally they can get 15 inches, 16 inches in saltwater. But in freshwater, they seldomly get over 6 or 7, and 7's a big one in freshwater. And so okay, so now we know that it's the perfect size forage. They actually only live about 5 years ish.
That's not bad for a bait fish.
No, they reach sexual maturity at 3.
That was my next question, Frank.
Right. So they reach sexual maturity at 3 years old. So they spawn. Now here's the difference. Okay, the saltwater version that migrate into the freshwater rivers, they say they spawn in 53, 53 to 65 degree range. But I think more what they're talking about is they start their spawning migration when it's like 53 to 55.
So pretty cold.
It's pretty cold. So in the freshwater, the spawning temperature is usually upper 60s to mid 70s. That's when the major herring spawn is. Okay. They feed on zooplankton or zooplankton, however you pronounce it, whatever you want to pronounce it at. But they also will eat small fish larvae, and unfortunately fish eggs. So that a lot of these striper lakes, that everybody complains that they put the stripers in. And this is what I learned also the other day. They put the stripers in to control the blueback population, because there's a certain range that blueback herring take where the bass don't really inhabit that kind of depth where the stripers will. And so the stripers keep the bluebacks in check, because a blueback could spawn a few times in the month. And if they're dumping 30,000, 60,000 eggs every time they spawn, that's a lot of bluebacks. So that's really kind of, the deal with the spawning and everything from the blueback herring.
But they started out as a saltwater fish.
Started out as a saltwater.
Every freshwater blueback has. I mean, obviously they spawn and stuff, but there's no native bluebacks in freshwater.
No,
they just happen to be able to survive.
Now, some of the bluebacks, in all honesty, some of the bluebacks got in some of these lakes through the series of locks and dams.
Okay.
Some were stocked intentionally. Some were unintentionally stocked by other fishermen. So knowing that, we got to understand the movement and behavior of the blueback. So we know, because they feed on zooplankton, they're pelagic. They're roamers. They roam all over the place. They're always going to be with the wind, because the wind's going to move a lot of the plankton, and they chase the plankton. They follow the plankton. That's how they live. Now, here's something really cool. Everybody says, well, do you catch more fish on a jerkbait or a topwater when it's sunny or cloudy or, blah, blah, blah? Well, herein lies a key, especially on blueback lakes. On those bright sunny days on blueback herring lakes, the bluebacks bunch up and they come towards the surface, where your shad, your thread fins, and your gizzards will go down. Okay? So the bass that are totally accustomed to feeding on the bluebacks follow this pattern. Oneida Lake in New York has blueback herring in it.
Really?
Yes. I absolutely smash the fish on Oneida on bright sunny days, throwing jerkbaits and topwaters. And I didn't understand why. I just figured that the smallmouth in Oneida just liked the sunny days. But now I understand why, because that it's the habit of the blueback, and these fish are feeding on the bluebacks. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, bluebacks also are a soft rayed fish, and they're not very bony. So they make perfect bass food. And, it's almost like the Lake Erie goby. It's like a marshmallow, and the smallmouth can't help themselves. They got to eat them. And they're literally super soft, full of protein. It's like eating a protein bar, basically, for a fish. You know what I mean?
And there's no risk. Like, there's no spine spikes, anything that can damage the gills. It's always like, you said, it's like the goby of the.
Right. That's 100% right. So when you look at that, so you could say, okay, well, I'll throw a little fishing reference in here. Okay. So, all right. So, you're on a blueback herring lake, right? So, and the water's clear, because bluebacks don't survive in off-color dirty water situations. So, it's clear. So what are you going to do? So you're going to target long tapering points, the edges off of flats. All right. You're going to throw topwaters on them. You're going to throw jerk baits on them. You're going to cover the upper end of the water column, even though you may be over 10 or 12 feet. It's not going to matter, because those bluebacks are coming up. The bass are right behind them. The bass know what's going on. I'll tell you something crazy. When I fished Hartwell for the first time, I saw a dude run his boat up on a sandbar, okay, and stopped his boat. He didn't run it up aground. Yeah. He ran up on the actually it was a saddle. He ran up on the saddle, turned the boat around, shut it off, jumped on the front deck. Intentionally, jumped on the front deck with a spook. 2 seconds later, all these bass are going crazy, and this guy throws that spook out there, and he starts catching these nice largemouth. So I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Because we're all under the impression you sneak up and you do, stealth approach. This guy literally, I watched him do it in 4 or 5 areas, and he was making these bluebacks push off of these saddles, and the largemouth were already there because they follow him everywhere. And as soon as the bluebacks went down because of the guy's boat, the bass pushed him up. It was one of the craziest things I'd ever seen in my life, and I will never ever forget it. So you gotta, just understanding the bluebacks and how they move and what they have to do is going to give you a much better understanding of the fishery. So if we sit there and we go, okay, so let's talk about how they go. So most of the time we know, especially in the summer months, they're pelagic, so they live in open water and they roam around. Now here's a cool thing, and I experienced this on a lot of lakes in the North Carolina. In the wintertime, bluebacks migrate up the rivers and to the backs of creeks and big long pockets.
We've seen this in the Classic in Hartwell's past, where guys are in the backs of creeks and pockets, the water's in the 40s, and the bass are schooling on blueback herring. Absolutely. I specifically remember that.
Yep, that's why. So that's exactly why, and it's crazy. So here's what happens, because that's their winter migration. Now this is going to get interesting. That's their winter migration. I can tell you countless times on some of these North Carolina lakes in December and January, where I'm going all the way in the back of these long creeks, and they're bass everywhere. Not only largemouth and spotted bass mostly, but stripers too. And so you can literally find these fish if you find the stripers, because the stripers are never not going to be with them. Never, ever. So, and that's kind of crazy. Now, here's the other thing, okay? Bluebacks are very sensitive to, I'm going to say dirty water, but it's not like dirty water like you think, but like sediment-filled water, where you see the water's turbid and it's got like particulate matter floating around in it. They're very sensitive to that, and it can kill them. So they always stay in front of your mud lines.
They're blue water, quote unquote.
Yes, the clean water, clean water. They always stay in front of that mud line. So if you know this, and you know that they run up the rivers and up these creeks in the wintertime, right? And let's say you're down south, because most of them are down south. But let's say you're down south, you get a rain situation. Now you got some runoff pumping in. The backs of your creeks are starting to get dirty. You know, now you just have to get out of that dirty water. Right where that water starts to clean up, you're going to get back into the blueback herring, right? This is important to know. Now, the crazy thing is they're in the creeks, up the backs of the pockets in the winter. They're actually, as winter starts to wane, they actually start moving back towards the main lake to spawn. They spawn on long points, ends of flats, saddles, sandbars. They'll even spawn on deeper grass flats if the grass is right. Now they're not nest makers. They don't make a nest. They drop eggs. So the two get together. She's laying eggs. He's taking care of them.
Okay, so that's why the know-nothing banks, like on the lower end of Hartwell, Murray, things like that, are productive, because they're ideal spawning locations, not because it's a great bank for them to spawn on.
Correct. So they spawn on sand and hard bottom. They'll spawn with, wood debris or grass. They drop their eggs fall down. As soon as they hit something, they stick to them. So they want something solid, hard, so those
and
eggs.
The males come past and do their thing.
They do it together as the eggs
it's like gar. That's what gar do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the long-nosed gar. You'll see the big female gar, the male gar poking the female gar with their nose as she drops the eggs. They fertilize it as it drops, and they're on long tapering points all around Oklahoma and across the southeast.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
So now what we're going to do is now I'm going to just show you some maps and I'm going to show you locations. And I'm going to start with winter because we're going to start with the winter location because that's where it all begins, really. All right. So if you look at the map, I have yellow boxes.
So
where the hell am I? Okay.
You're good.
You have yellow boxes. Those yellow boxes, okay, are winter locations. Probably
edge of the creeks, back third of basically every major creek if you're listening on iTunes.
100%, the back thirds of these little creeks, or up the river, the back third up the river over here. So this is a winter location, right? So understand this. That's where they're going to spend the rest. That's where they're spending the winter time. Okay. Now
what are they doing up there? They just hanging out? They just like it up there?
They like the currents. They like the cleaner water.
Okay. And there's going to be less turbidity because typically it's more stable in those winter months.
Correct. So now we're going to go into spring. Okay. So now you notice they're just backing out to the middle of the creeks now. They're backing out from the river to the middle. They're backing from the backs to the middle. To the middle. So you see they're working their way out. Okay, and they're always going to stay in front of the dirty water. This is very important to remember in the spring because you're going to have a lot of rains. So if your spring is unusually rainy, you have a lot of rain in the mix, those fish might be farther out of that creek, depending on where that mud line goes. So here's another cool thing. If you know a certain lake and you know that almost never get dirty, or for the most part, they don't get dirty, and you know it's got bluebacks in it, if you're there winter, spring, you need to go to those creeks first. You follow me? Because they'll stay put.
Condense them.
They'll stay put. As the mud line comes down, those fish move in front of it. They're never going to be caught.
I would like to also, it's interesting the areas that you boxed in for the spring are basically your classic pre-spawn staging areas for your bass.
That is absolutely correct. That's 100%.
You could show that same map for pre-spawn staging areas.
No questions. It's the exact same location.
Little secondary points.
Yes.
At the mouths of spawning coves, bays, creeks, things like that.
Exactly. So now we're going to go into summer. Where's my summer? Here's summer. Now, summer's important. Okay. You see the difference in the locations in the summer.
Basically have the entire main lakes circled.
Correct. Pretty much. Now, what's important about this is also where they're going to spawn. That's why that's important. This is their spawning locations. They will spawn in the mouths of creeks. Okay, they will. But it's going to be very, very, very near the main lake. That's where bluebacks spawn. So their summer location is really important. All right? Now, the crazy thing is we're going to go back to the fall, which is almost going to be an exact duplicate of spring. I mean, of winter.
Of winter.
I mean,
okay.
It's almost the exact same thing. Because now in the fall, they're making their migration. Okay, so now that is how the blueback herrings move through your systems. So now let's talk about bass for a minute. I always target what I call the bass that live on the main lake. That's my favorite place to fish. I do a lot of structure fishing out there. The bass seldomly spawn super shallow there, so I can concentrate 8 feet or deeper. It's just my wheelhouse. That's just where I focus. So these are bass that live on the main lake. Your next set of resident fish live up the creeks and up the rivers. They don't leave them. They live there. They're residents. Way up the river, way up the creeks. They just live there. Now you have your pelagic bass, which really pelagic is probably the wrong word for them. They just roam around underneath the herring. They follow the herring all through the system.
Bait chasers is what you call them.
They're just main lake bait chasers. They live out there. They seldomly come in unless they're spawning. All they do is run these.
They look different. They're built
herring.
Different, typically.
Yeah, they are. And so that brings up, like, okay, so speaking about being built different, right? All right, let's talk about that. So your resident fish in the backs of creeks and everything, most of them range between 1.5 pounds and 2.5, 3 pounds. Every now and then you get a big one in there in the mix. That's just what you can expect. Your pelagic chasers, your baitfish chasers, these fish here, they're relatively between 3 and 5 pounders. All they do is chase them things and eat them all day, every day. That's what they do. Okay. You seldomly are going to catch a 7 or an 8 pounder in that group of fish. You just won't. Okay. And then of course your lake resident fish, the fish that live in the lake the whole time, those sizes vary. That's probably the biggest mix of bass sizes that you'll encounter. Okay. So here, this is crazy because this is, like, in my fishing experience, I know because I'm a fisherman that targets most of the time fish that live main lake. There are times when I'll run up the creeks and up the rivers because you have to. All right. And so on these blueback herring lakes, there's always this place where I really catch them good. This is something that I just got that oh wow moment where now I understand why. Mm-hmm. This is going to be confusing, so you're just going to have to bear with me on this.
We're with you.
This is confusing. And I'm going to tell you something. There's a video out there by Michael Murphy, and Matt mentioned it a bunch of shows ago. Michael Murphy, it's the biology and fish movements of the blueback herring. Okay.
This is a PhD in it.
Dude, this is where I got this from. This right here in my hand from. This was the eye opener for me. Okay. Because I knew I catch fish in these places. I didn't understand a whole lot why. I just knew it worked. Now here it is. This is a confusing map.
Holy cow.
Okay, but here
the whole lake is boxed in with 4 different types of boxes.
Right, but I'm gonna make it easy for you.
Okay. Pull it out just a little so we can see the bottom of it there. Up just a little.
Oh, up.
There, it's like scratching your back.
Okay.
Up, over
up, over, right.
Over. Oh yeah.
Okay,
right
so the green boxes are your resident creek and river fish. They live there forever. They never leave it. Okay.
Those are like the fish Christy was catching in the last classic on Hartwell.
Yes, exactly. They live there forever. All right. Now, if you go to the orange box, those are your bait runners, your pelagic chasers. Okay. And then if you go to the pink boxes, Those are the ones that live on the main lake. Those are the lake livers. Those are the ones that I love to focus on. But if you look where each one of these boxes overlaps, another box or two boxes, those are the highest concentrations of fish in the area. So if you know how the bluebacks move, you can go to these overlapping sections, and there's so many feeding fish in those sections. Like here, for example, here, all the overlap stuff, right? You know there's so many fish in those sections of the lake that you're actually encountering, you're making these fish eat, because the more they start to feed, the more the other fish feed, because they're predators. They can be full, stuffed to the gills, fish falling out of their mouth. And the minute another bass goes to eat something, another one tries to eat it too. I had an aquarium. I had a 125-gallon tank with a bunch of bass in it, and I would drop 50 goldfish in there, and they would be smoldering these goldfish. Mm-hmm. They would have so many goldfish in their mouth that when they opened their mouth to get another goldfish, 2 goldfish would come out of their mouths. But they never stopped eating them until every one of them was gone. And they would all sit at the bottom of the tank after they ate them all with tails sticking out of their mouths, goldfish tails everywhere. Then if I drop another one in and one bass goes for it, they all go for it. Even though they're full, they're stuffed to the walls and they're full, they still go for it. Those are the highest percentage places you could possibly be on a blueback herring lake. Now that you understand the blueback movements, you could go, okay, well, I know that in the winter, they're in the backs of the creeks, right? So your pelagic chasers are following them to the backs of the creeks. Well, now all of a sudden you got resident fish that live back there. So now you've got these bait chasers back there and residents back there. So now you're putting more fish in a certain area. As those herring move out in the spring and they get closer to the mouth of the lake or closer to the main lake, your bait chasers are following them out. Mm-hmm. But your main lake livers, the fish that I love to chase, now you've got that overlap there. So now you're putting a lot of fish in the same area on those overlap spots. That's the best understanding of a blueback herring lake that I have, that you can ever have. This is absolutely the deal on every single blueback herring lake. It is just the deal. So knowing that on the sunnier days, the bluebacks are going to rise, even in the winter, they're going to come up. Okay. It makes your bait choices a whole lot easier, right? So you'll throw a suspending jerk bait. This jerk bait here is juice color. It was designed for those blueback lakes. Mm-hmm. It's got an amber side to it. It's got a little purplish back that fades into a little greeny back. This bait was designed for that. There's a rogue called Lady, which is almost like table rock shad, only it's semi-transparent. Mm-hmm. It's just very subtle. All right. And then this is where your swim baits come into play now too. So like here, look at this Scottsboro swim bait. I'm going to show you 2 of them. Okay. The first one, this color is called sexy shad, but it is by no means sexy shad. This color here is almost like a perfect blueback herring representation. It's got the hint of blue glimmer on the back. It's got a pearly white belly with some amber flake in it. This is freaking money. Okay. So now listen to this. I told you earlier that when these bluebacks get stressed out, they go through a slight color change while they're dying, right? Mm-hmm. So then if you look at this one here, now all of a sudden you're looking at the back is dark. It's blue. It's dark. The white belly, pearl white belly. Now this starts to look like a dying blueback.
Mm-hmm.
This is called bluegill, I think. But so now it starts looking like a dying blueback. That's why on these blueback herring lakes, underspins play such an important role. You put a swim bait on an underspin. You throw a swim bait on a jig head. Now you can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And of course, on any blueback lake, you can't go without having a super spook on, because the topwater bite is just insane on these lakes. And here's something else I learned. Bass in clear water, okay? Let's say you look in the water, you drop your lure over the side of the boat, and you see how far down you can see that bait. Let's say you see it 3 feet deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they got 3 foot visibility. They can only see 3 feet. Well, this is something else I learned. No, multiply that by 3. That's how far the bass can see.
Really?
Yes. So you can only see it 3 feet down. Okay. But the bass can see 9 feet. So now that tells me a lot of different things about a lot of stuff fishing wise with color and everything too, right? So the clearer the water, the farther the bass could see. So if you've got 6 feet of visibility and you've got a brush pile in 30 feet and your bass is suspended 15 feet high, he can see the surface and he can see the brush pile. You follow me?
Yep.
So now when them bluebacks come up and go ripping by, Mr. Suspender here can run up and get them. So it's conceivable that you can catch them on a top water being that deep.
What I'm doing, looking here at the internet, I wanted to make sure I was right. I believe both Alton, which is more of a winner, and Casey Ashley, when it was cold, when they won their classics, those areas, I think Ashley was kind of around Party Island there, in those boxes that overlapped those areas.
Yeah, dude.
That you had on your lake. I mean, I know you didn't have Lake Hartwell there, but when you did that, I was like, I think that Ashley was catching resident fish on brush piles of that, and then also targeting on that. Talks a lot about the clear water, Alton with the jig in the deeper water. They were both in portions of Hartwell. If you were to do that exact same thing on Hartwell,
it would work.
They were in areas where all 3 of those boxes overlapped.
Right. Now, hear this.
And before I said it, I just wanted to do my research and make sure that it was right. Yeah. But, when you said that, I went through and I'm looking through winning areas and notes and stuff, and I'm like, well, son of a gun. They're around the highest population of fish.
Right. Now, here, the other thing I do on blueback lakes that I've done forever, spoonfish. Mm-hmm. Dude, I would get over the brush piles on like Lake Martin, and I wouldn't even get out of my driver's seat. I'd find a deep brush pile, and I would just drop my spoon over the side of the boat, pump it up a couple times. I'd catch one, reel them in, waypoint the brush pile, and find another one. And I spent one whole practice day doing nothing but that, and I barely ever got out of my driver's seat on my bass boat. I found like 30 brush piles that had fish on them. So these are things that you have to realize on these blueback herring lakes. There's certain techniques that just lend themselves to blueback herring lakes, and that's just the way it goes. I mean, it's incredibly detailed, but it's not difficult if you understand it.
It's not difficult to put yourself in the highest percentage area to have success.
No,
that's the key to it.
Right.
Putting yourself in an area to have success.
Right, exactly, Matt. As long as you understand that overlap and you understand why and when, it's money. So what happens when a group of these pelagic, what happens when they meet? Do they, I mean, does anybody know? Can you even hypothesize what happens when you have a group of resident fish, say on a cane pile, on a brush pile or whatever? Bluebacks are in the same area. The fish that
aren't living related to that brush pile happen to be in the same area, will some of those fish get pulled out of that brush part of their where they live and then get sucked like lemmings? Will they be like, oh, look at all these fish and pull it away from the brush pile? Or will they take the opportunistic and stay right there? Will some of the pelagics become brush pile fish? Or, I mean...
I'm almost 100% sure, just based on nature, that you're going to have some of that going on.
You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of weird. But obviously, if you can find an area where there's both, it's the best of both worlds. Because if you have a group come through that are herring chasers 2 or 3 times a day, well, boom, you can get your kickers. You're in a high percentage area, and you're not finding Waldo the rest of the day because you know that you can still cast to areas that have resident fish and are living there. It's a win-win situation.
It is a win-win.
Because I wrote down, based on what you said here real quick, the easiest way to win on blueback herring lakes is to target herring chasers. The toughest thing to do on blueback herring lakes is to target herring chasers in multiple day tournaments because of how random it is. So you'll see one day, you find them, you go back, you know it's around somewhere, but it's not. So that's why I think you see a lot of the multiple day tournaments, it plays a role, but it's never an exclusive thing. I think if you go back in one day tournaments, you have guys, they come up schooling, bam, bam, bam. Like on Smith Lake is a good example of that. You know, in one day, you can catch you a 21, 22-pound bag. You come in with 4 pounds the next day.
Oh, 100%. 100%. That's the big trick with. That's the big trick when you're chasing moving fish.
But then based on what you said, does that not, especially because they haven't been in there forever. I mean, there's old school anglers. It's a kind of a recent thing. But I'm starting to think in my head, I'm thinking the Montgomery's, Britt Myers, Casey Ashley's, Brian Thrifts, Brian News, Hank Cherries. I'm thinking of these anglers in the way they fish. And I believe that their style is, whether subconsciously or consciously, growing up fishing all these blueback herring lakes, chasing these fish that are moving so much, trying to figure out where they are, the condition of stuff, is molding them into being successful anglers across the country. Because you look at how quickly Hank Cherry, Brian New, Brian Thrift, lots of rods on the deck, lots of adjustment, lots of running and gunning, lots of one-stop spots, lots of moving until you land on bingo.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the herring are forcing them to learn how to fish all these ways. And then they're just applying it across the other part of the country, knowing at some place at some point there's active fish that are targeting these herring, these bait fish, and I think it's made them into the anglers that they are today. I could be way off on that. I could be thinking way too deep into that, but I'm just thinking of how they fish and their styles, and I'm like, dude, that's like how you find the active herring feeders.
Yeah, and I don't think you're off at all, actually. I don't think you're off at all in that.
Patrick Walters, yeah, he's in there.
You know,
KJ Queen, Brandon Cobb. You want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Matt Airy.
We got time to fill. Keep going.
But they all do that. They're like a run and gun.
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. You know, you just have to understand the movements. I mean, I can go through the herring movements one more time quickly if you want.
It's your show. Go for it.
We can do that. Okay, so here, let's talk movement. These are herring, not the bass. This is your winter locations.
Yep.
Figure winter, you're going to the backs. Okay. Then your spring movements.
Late winter FLW 14, Ashley won running the very backs and then moving out afterwards.
And probably because maybe there was a mud line coming in, or the herring were moving out.
Clean water was incredibly important in both victories.
That's why, because herring. So now you're talking about spring. They're in the midsections. You go into summer, and they're getting to where they're going to spawn, and they're on the main lake stuff. And then, of course, you go back to the fall, and they're almost all the way in the backs again. Whoa, where the heck am I?
There you go.
So that's really kind of as best I can put it. It's kind of simple, really, if you understand that, and then you understand. Whoa. You know, everything's backwards when I look at it.
No, I know it's the same thing with me too. It's like when you first try to back a trailer up.
Oh yeah, exactly. Exactly. So then if you go to this map, you see your green spots are your resident creek livers that live in the resident all the time. Okay. All your orange stuff is your pelagic chasers or your bait chasers. And all your pink stuff are the ones that live on the main lake. So now if you know the herring movements, you could focus in on all the overlaps and really put yourself on fish most of the time on these herring lakes. Of course, there's going to be times when the crankbait's king, when a football jig's king, jerk bait, swim bait, you know what I mean? And that will you'll determine that based on your conditions that you're in. Because like in the wintertime, when I fish the North Carolina lakes in the wintertime, we're throwing flash mob juniors back there most of the time and just hammering them. But you catch a lot of stripers too doing that, which isn't bad if you're fun fishing, you know. But if you're in a tournament, you don't want to waste time on a 9-pound striper.
It's good stuff, Frank.
It's cool. I love it.
Like I said, you can do that with all of the bait fish too. As far as I mean, just those basic boxes. Do that with your own lake. Take your own lake. Figure out where the threadfin, the gizzard shad, the alewives, whatever. Just, I mean, it doesn't have to be in relation, and then say, okay, I think this is it, this is it, this is it, and start there. Make your own boxes on your own lake.
I mean, here at Great Lakes, in the fall, the emerald shiners, the shad, and most of your bait fish on Lake Erie gravitate towards the river systems and the estuaries and the main bank. In the winter, that's why those guys catch walleyes off the bank in the wintertime here before the lake freezes. They slaughter them because that's where all the bait is. And, you know, predators are never far from food. Never far from food.
I was incredulous at the beginning of the show that there are blueback herring in Oneida.
Yeah.
And I found a study in 1998 that talks about how they get from the ocean through all these locks and dams into the Great Lakes and where they've been sampled and where they've been taken from. And I mean, it is quite the journey, but
yeah,
it is.
Once they get there, they're there.
You know, here's a section of the Erie Canal that connects the Atlantic to the Great Lake drainage near Rome, lock 20 and 21 on the west section. It goes from the confluence of the Mohawk and Hudson rivers, the Great Lakes drainage. Then it goes into Oneida. And then Oneida drains into Ontario through the Oneida Oswego rivers. And then
it's kind of amazing, really. If
all of them open and close, and you've got these things that come from the ocean and
then they're
make their way through all of these massive lakes.
Right. Then they're landlocked, but they can survive in fresh and salt.
They were collected in the Upper Mohawk River, Oneida Lake, Oswego River, and Lake Ontario using a variety of methods from electrofishing to nets to gill nets, vertical gill nets, everything.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because in bright sunny days you use chromes and lots of good reflection. On overcast days you go white, and here on Oneida one day I was catching them on super spooks. Bright sunny calm days, thrashing them on super spooks. We had cloud cover and wind roll in. I went to a white bladed spinnerbait and mauled them because they wouldn't come up on the spook anymore. They were down lower, but the white bladed spinnerbait was the key.
And that is the opposite of what it is most of the time on fish. You would think bright sunny and things. You would think, oh, they're going to be down in the water column, but on those bluebacks, that's when you want to be moving a bait on top fast.
That's right. And so here it's the opposite of gizzard, shad, and threadfin. So you just got to remember that. If the lake has more threadfin and gizzards in it, you're doing the opposite. If the lake is a blueback lake, you fish towards the top in the sunlight, you fish deeper in the cloud cover. And it's the opposite when you have a shad-based forage.
And that's just said, yeah, Jordan Lee did win off docks, but you're also talking about he was not targeting the blueback fish there. It was also a pre-spawn deal where the water was warming, which we might run into this time. And the wacky worm on the docks, I mean, that was more of a resident fish, largemouth, adjusting to pattern that was evolving.
Right. So I'll tell you something else about, you know, Hartwell and Clark's Hill and stuff. The bluebacks spawn right towards the end of the bass spawn. So when you have the early spawners of your bass, they're starting to pull out to their summer patterns. And these bluebacks are coming in to spawn, and they're spawning where the bass are pulling out to. You just have a whole food chain going on, you know, at this water depth. It's almost like tailor made. You know what I mean? It's just tailor made for success.
Are there any slow baits that work for herring eaters? Is it all speed?
Swim baits and stuff like that. I mean, if you put a swim bait on a horse head, you know, you're relegated to keep it off the bottom. But for the most part, you know, your spinner baits, top waters, jerk baits, and stuff like that. You're just
plastic jerk baits. Yeah, all those weird
exactly.
Baits.
You're fishing in a certain water column is what you're doing, and you want to keep the bait there.
This is another show that I think we could do, but in the limited blueback experience that I have, which I did a lot for that championship, I fished on Hartwell there. So I mean, I fished 15, 16 days on it, and then obviously Smith and Norman and all that. So I fished a few of them.
Right.
Is you know, you look at the baits and you look at some of the stuff that works, and what's really important is it seems to me, the swimming action or lack thereof, the motion of the bait, skipping, moving straight, reeling in. You know, a lot of the top waters and the guys you watch, you know, it's not a doom, doom, doom with your spook. It's
aggressive.
And it's like, this thing's not hardly even walking. It's kind of skipping out of the water, especially with your soft stick baits and things like that.
Correct.
And then you're like, well, how the hell are they ever going to get a hold of one of those? And then you watch a blueback that's getting chased by a school of largemouth, and you're like, well, that thing isn't exactly wiggling. It's going in a straight line about 50 miles an hour, skipping out of the water every 20 feet. And it's on one side of the boat in 1 second, and 2 skips later, it's 50 yards in front of you. And they go, whoosh, and then it's gone. And you're like, okay, they can catch more than we give them credit for. And just because it doesn't look like it's nice and even wiggly, that's not what they look like when they're trying to get away.
No, they got the will to live, you know, and you know, that's how the double fluke rig got discovered. Remember that rig?
Yeah, no, it was real popular it was legal, I believe, until the Alabama rig became illegal.
Yeah, it's so weird.
You could use it on the Elite Series, right? Back in 07, 08?
Yeah, the double fluke. Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. And so you have a crane swivel and a leader and your super fluke. Okay. Then before you do all that, you put a swivel up your line just through one of the holes. So you tie like a 20-inch leader on the main. Then on the swivel that's free flowing, you tie half the distance of a leader. So if you were to hold it up, you'd have one lure here and one lure here. Well, when you jerk that thing in the water, one goes this way, one goes that way, and they crisscross and they do all this funky stuff. I learned how to fish that rig on Hartwell, of all places, because of the blueback herring. And it was deadly, absolutely deadly. I've done it before on non-blueback herring lakes. It works, but it's not nearly as effective. It's just that, you know, because here's something I'm going to tell you. When you're throwing, especially like here on Oneida, I'm throwing that white spinner bait, and I'm cranking it in. And I got these herring, and they're smoking the blade. They're hitting that blade, hitting that blade, hitting that blade. That's how you know you're in the money. When you're reeling in a spinner bait and they're blade banging you, you're in the money, okay? Because you're by them. And it's the same thing with the jerk bait. You'll pump the jerk bait, and you'll see them all with the jerk bait. Every time your jerk bait moves, they're all moving. Or conversely, you actually snag some with the jerk bait. That's how you know you're in the money on these blueback lakes. You know, when you're throwing an underspin, they'll bump it, tick it. Now, you won't necessarily see them because you're doing it much deeper, but you can feel it. And you're like, whoa, nothing's there. You know what I mean? That's just the bluebacks banging it. That's how you know you're in the money. I mean, these bait fish let you know you're doing it right or wrong. If you're not seeing a fish follow you, you're probably not on them. Now, with today's electronics,
that's cool that you mentioned that. I was just watching the 2005 E50 from Lake Louisville in Texas, and they get on the whole course, and Kevin Van Dam makes two or three casts, and he says, I can feel the shad hitting the blades of the spinnerbait. And he catches one fish, and he looks at the camera, he goes, I'm all in on this. And it was strictly just because of those first couple casts, he said you could feel the shad hitting the spinnerbait.
Yeah, it's just paying attention to what's going on around you, really. But it's really cool. I mean, that's why this sport's so much fun, because you could take it to any level you want. Listen, here, you go to a lake, you launch your boat, and you see a dude sitting on a lounge chair with a bobber out and a cooler next to him, and he's eating his chips and sandwich or whatever, waiting for that little bobber to go under. Is that wrong? No. To him, that's the greatest thing on earth.
Mm-hmm.
To you, Matt, or to some of the guys watching that are aspiring to be professionals, that's not your cup of tea. That's not your game plan. So you want to take it to the next level and to the next level. So there's no right or wrong in fishing, and that's what I love about it. When my kids were little, the only thing I had to do for them was get them to catch something, whether it was creek chub in the stream, bluegill in a pond. It didn't matter. They just needed to catch something. And it was the greatest experience of their life because they caught something. You know what I mean? And so at every level, fishing is exciting, and no level is the wrong level. If you just want to go drown a nightcrawler under a bobber or a minnow under a bobber, God bless you. Because if that's your idea of a great day, then guess what? It's a great day. You know what I mean? So that's the other reason why this sport is so good, because you can take it anywhere you want to take it.
That's good stuff. I think we would be remiss in the blueback herring to where if you are clueless and do not know where to go and you happen to come across a lot of striper fishermen that are pulled up on the bank, you are probably around bass too, because they will not fish for stripers, not around the blueback herring. And just like you can figure out where the stripers are on Lake Texoma out there on the East Coast, a lot of the times you can know that you're fairly certain you're around bluebacks if there's a lot of striper boats. Particularly, I'm not... even out in the middle like that and trolling stuff, but on Hartwell and stuff, you'll get it to where they're pulled up on the bank casting out, and that's kind of where hey,
you know where this
is a section of the lake. They're not there for their health. They're there because the bluebacks are there, and they're using a blueback for bait anyway. But you know that the bass will be around there too.
Well, how about when you and Mark went out and smashed those stripers in the back of those pockets?
Yep.
I mean,
hundreds of boats.
What time of year was that?
May, June.
Oh, May, June.
Yeah, it was a topwater deal.
Yeah, I mean,
but there were bass around. But I mean, they weren't. Those were shad eaters. But it's the same thing. I mean, the guys who do this for a living, day in and day out, they know where that bait is.
Stripers, white bass, and hybrids will never, ever not be where bait is. Never. Those fish never let that stuff out of their sight.
It's good stuff. We got to figure out what we're doing next Thursday, because the Classic starts on Friday. I'll actually be at Hartwell next Thursday for it. So maybe I might have to double up. Are you available on a Wednesday?
I can be.
We might have to do day 4 on day 3.
Uh-oh. More numbers. Don't worry. We'll have a diagram.
You think we can you think you can handle that?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do day 4 on day 3 next week, Uncle Frank. So we'll do a Monday, Tuesday BTL, and then we'll do a day 4 on day 3.
I'm writing it down right now. Wednesday BTL. So we're in.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I gotta.
Speaking of BTL, BTL 22 15% off at LureNet. You guys, 4 days left on this. You have 4 days left, so take advantage of it if you haven't already.
We got anything new over there?
Scott.
Oh, that's you. You type in lurenet.com.
I come up.
It says Bass Talk Live Day 4 with Frank Scalish this Thursday at 8:30. Watch here.
Holy smokes.
On LureNet.
Look at that.
Yeah, it goes to BTO. That's fantastic.
I didn't even know that.
I was unaware of that.
Good thing I'm in the loop.
Man, you got a nice smallmouth there. You're all camoed out.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you got to have camouflage when you're fishing for smallies. That's the trick.
Olive blue. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, remember Scottsboro swim baits are in over there now. I showed you the 2 good blueback colors, Sexy Shad and Bluegill. It's just, I'm telling you guys, jerk baits, swim baits, spinner baits.
I don't know if you've been paying attention. Who you got in the Classic right now? A week out. I'll see if it changes for next week. Any of the Carolina guys?
You threw me for a loop, dude.
The Carolina guys. After we did a Blueback show, you can't pick someone who's not well versed in the movements of the Blueback.
Is Stetson in? He's got to be in.
Yeah, I believe so.
He has to be.
Yeah. He's in.
All right, I'm going with Blaylock.
Yeah, look,
that's my choice.
I'm getting really good at
You're doing good, man. You're doing fast. You're getting way faster now.
Yeah, I think all the normal guys. Man, I hate it when they do the photos. I wish they just had a list. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It'd be easier. You can just scroll right down the list. Get the name you want. And be done with it.
And yeah, no, I'm scrolling.
You're scrolling, dude.
Scrolling. All right, you got anything else?
No, dude, I'm good, man. I'm dropping everything
there he is.
here.
Stetson Blaylock.
Good.
Barely made it. 39th. Angler of the Year. 39th ranked.
Doesn't matter. He's in.
Yep.
You're in. Whether you win by an ounce or win by 10
I knew
pounds.
It was fairly close. That's why I didn't want to just go full in on it. And people be like, what the hell?
Go all in. Hey, we're going all in. 28 black or 28 red.
Do you get a little nervous every time Classic Year as a lure designer, as a bait designer and painter? I mean, there is the possibility, like we'd seen a couple years ago at Gunnersville. I mean, obviously some bait that someone designed is going to win the Classic, but do you watch the Classic with bated breath to see if one of your creations?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I did with the speed end because that bait filled a void in the Norman lineup. The Norman crankbaits is really a super complete crankbait line. You have everything from your DD22 all the way to your deep baby end, and you cover all those depth ranges in there. And the speed end was just a little slight missing link. So when I did that bait, it was to fill a void in the lineup. What happened was it was a very last minute thing because we rammed it through, tried to get it done on time, got enough actual physical, I'm going to call it a prototype, but really it was the final version, and got it to the guys.
Would you send them each a half dozen?
Yeah, that's all we had.
Like Micah and Stetson and stuff, and it's like, hey, here it is. This is what you got.
Yeah, and Stetson really put it to work. I mean, that dude figured it out right immediately. And he caught some slobs on that thing in that Classic. I got kind of excited then, I'll be honest with you.
You're like, oh my gosh.
When he was sitting, because wasn't he in like third or second place for one of the days?
And, he was up there. It was just that Hank just had like that mega bag, and it was hard to, he let off a little bit but there wasn't a ton of drama on it. Like it was Hank's to lose.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
But I mean, it would have been nuts if he hadn't had that mega bag. It'd have been one of the closest in history. Yeah,
and so it was kind of crazy. I did get excited for that. You know what I mean? I really did. I mean, the guys we got fishing for us are pretty good guys, and Stetson did a really good job. I couldn't even pick apart his game plan. I mean, not one bit of it. I mean, he did everything he could possibly do. You know what I mean? It's just Hank Cherry had a runway of slobs that were moving into the spawning grounds.
Runway of slobs.
He did, and they were moving in, and he figured out the exact stretches on that riprap and exactly where he needed to be depth wise and how far off those rocks he needed to be. Because a lot of times those bass, when they migrate down those causeways, either they're plastered on the rocks or they're suspending off the rocks or they're relating to the basin where the rocks meet the bottom of the lake. And he had it dialed in where he was really catching all the big females. I mean, it was a thing of beauty as a fisherman to watch. That event was exciting. I mean, for me, it was an exciting event. Honestly, I started following this stuff a lot more since BTL, only because I don't want to be caught with a question that I might not have an answer to. So I try to watch it, but I can't possibly watch every single bit of live coverage on these events.
I mean, yeah, he outfished Hank by like 4.5 pounds on the last 2 days. He's the only guy in the top 10 in that classic, 2020 on Guttersville. He went 18.5, 19.4, and 20 pounds 8 ounces.
Yeah, he where did he wind up at? Fourth?
He was third. He was third, but he was 58.1. Hank won it with 65.5, but he was 11th after the first day. He had 18.5, but Hank had 29.3. So he spotted him like 10.5 pounds and just wasn't able to make it up.
No, that's a big
Same
number.
with Todd Otten. I mean, yeah, he had 20 pounds. He had 10 pounds on the field after the first day, and then like he went 16 and 19, which I mean, I'm not saying he hung on to win. He still had good bags, but
oh yeah,
I mean, it's when they're biting, it's hard to make up a 10-pound deficit. Right. It's when they're not biting, yeah, because then you saw what we saw in Florida. You have a guy with one fish, 25 pounds, and so. But when it's that solid and you freak show it,
right,
it's hard to catch back up after that.
Exactly. I mean, that was an exciting event anyway. It was more exciting for me because it was one of my lures. But you know.
All right. I'm getting the closing queued up here. I'm trying to think of a more subtle way to end the show, Frank. I've been told that I've been ending the shows a little too abruptly.
Okay, so we'll just go like this. Hey guys, BTL 22, 4 days left on your 15% off LureNet code.
That's day 4 with Uncle Frank. February 24th, 2022. We will see you next Wednesday for another exciting day 4. Good job on the Blueback stuff. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. I did too.
We're out of here.